Welcome, viewers, to the latest in the series of AUK podcasts. I'm very pleased to say that I've got some excellent guests with me today. I have the president, he's newly elected, of Atheist Alliance International. This is, say your name.
David Orenstein, how are you?
Great, excellent. And I also have the secretary of the same organization, Atheist Alliance International, Bill Flavelle, formerly the vice president. Okay, guys, well, I'm going to go behind the camera now. So, the first thing I want to talk to you about, David, is you've just come back from Humanism International Conference in Glasgow?
Yeah.
How did that go?
Oh, it was a very good conference. I was there for basically 1.5 days. The conference was really focused on bringing a lot of panels together and guest speakers to talk about important subjects like the role of humanism in human rights, civil rights, and along those lines. And it was a lot of very good discussion. Some of it was about activism, and a lot of it seemed a little academic, but all of the speakers were very strong, they were very good, and I take these type of programs, because I've been doing this for 10 years, as a chance to learn from other people, but also to network and get a chance to see old friends and make new ones. So it was a very good conference.
Well, we sent our deputation to the same event. We sent Guy Otten as our delegate.
Ah, okay.
And I believe it was quite well attended.
Yeah.
So what's your attitude towards, because I know we're all not only in atheist organizations, but in humanist organizations too.
Sure.
So where do they fit together, guys? Have you got opinions about this?
I certainly do. I mean, I think that, while I tend to not necessarily want to focus on a particular label, because I don't think atheism or humanism are monolithic, right? You can be an atheist and not to be a humanist. You can be a humanist and not necessarily be an atheist. You can be religious and be a humanist.
Yes.
So I think it's where, for me, they naturally fit in, because humanism is more of a philosophy of being, where atheism, by its pure definition, is just not a belief in any divine force. And I have been an atheist since I'm 8 years old. I've probably been a humanist since I recognized what I wanted to do and what was important to me morally in the world, or ethically in the world. And that's where atheism or humanism fits in to my atheism. So for me, I think they're interchangeable, but for others, might not be.
Well, I think that humanism is atheism light.
Okay.
L-I-T-E. What do you say, Bill? Have you got any views on this?
Well, certainly atheists will come out and say, I don't believe in God. And that would be something which would be a feature of their personality. They will tell people that at all times. Humanists focus much more on their relationship with other people and how they find morals without God. But as you said, there are religious people who can call themselves humanists, although most people who are humanists really are atheists, aren't they?
Yes. If you went into a room of humanists and said, are you an atheist? Everybody will put up their hands, I think.
I imagine so.
I've tried that, actually, in a room of humanists in Manchester. Yes. So, yeah, I think humanism is really for atheists who want to join something. And I've joined it, so I'm in favour of it very much. So, you've just been elected.
Yes.
David.
In a free and fair election.
well, as president of AUK, I voted for you.
Well, thank you.
I know it was a secret ballot, but I'm prepared to reveal that I voted for you.
Thank you.
So, How do you feel just having obtained this role?
Well, it's 2 weeks now, and it is quite an honor to be affiliated with Atheist Alliance International. I think that the organization does incredible advocacy work, human rights work, and for me, that's the most important thing as someone who's now president of the board, is to focus on all of the good things that the board and its affiliates and its advisory group can do to make the world a little freer from religious violence, or even in particular granularly help individual people who are suffering religious violence. That to me is the highest calling of this organization, and that is what I'm focusing on, whether it be meeting with constituents, whether it be meeting with people who might want to donate as supporters, to know that more than 90% of every, I'm an American, so I'll say dollar raised goes directly into programming. So our overall cost for running the organization, which by the way, we're all volunteers. Nobody takes a salary here. So we take all of the glory and the abuse free of charge.
Yeah. And regretfully, there's quite a lot of blue on blue, isn't there? Because the other atheist groups seem to have detrimental attitudes towards some of this good work.
Yeah, I can't speak because I frankly wasn't here in 2016 and 2017. I can barely remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. And so, there are people who feel aggrieved by past governance issues with the board. And one of the things that we're doing now is we're hiring an independent company to actually do a review of governance, which we will ask them to speak to all people who are positive towards AAI as well as aggrieved parties, so we can not only identify but also make suggestions for the future, and also look future forward and not look at the past. There's a preacher, a televangelist in America. His name is Joel Orenstein. Okay, and I've watched him only because you should sort of know what's going on with these people. And I'm an atheist, but he had this great sermon, if you will. He said there's a reason why your windscreen is so large and your rearview mirror is so small, and that's because when it's what's in front of you that matters. Not necessarily when you're looking in the back, because when you're looking in the back, that's going to get smaller and smaller and smaller and eventually disappear. So for me, I'm looking at, in America, it's called a windshield, not a windscreen, so I hope I'm getting it right. So I'm looking out the windscreen forward. I am future focused because I believe in AAI. I believe in the work it does. I know that this is a just and good organization, and it is run by just and good people.
And don't forget that objects in the rear view mirror are nearer than they are.
Yes.
So we want to drive on and let them get small and diminish, disappear into the past. Bill, when I was with AAI, because up until a couple of years ago I was the publications director, and I remember that we'd achieved gold rating in the organisation that ranks charities.
Yeah, well, we have now have a platinum rating with that organisation. I can't remember what it's called. Charity Star.
I think so. Yeah, I don't.
I forgot too.
Yeah.
But you've gone up to the top level.
That is the top level. Yeah.
Great. So you've had some recent successes, I believe.
Yes.
Tell us about those.
I think one of the things we should just talk about first is why people join the board of organisations like AAI. everyone I know on the board does it because they are passionate about helping atheists and supporting atheism. So they're passionate about secularism. They're passionate about ensuring that people are not denigrated, hunted, prosecuted, killed, lose their family because they're atheists. Atheism should just be the same as being a conservative or a liberal or whatever. It's just your opinion on something that everyone should be prepared to accept and treat you as a human being.
Do you know, I'd go further. I'd say that we're all born atheists, like we're all born not conservatives or liberals. Or we have to learn these things. They have to be taught.
They're enculturated. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what drives the people mostly? I mean, we do have a role which is speaking up for atheists at the UN and EU and so forth. But on a day-to-day basis, what hits our inbox is people who say, "I've been accused of blasphemy. I'm in prison. Can you help me? I'm not being given a fair trial. My family are trying to kill me. They're hunting me down." These are everyday things. This is literally every single day. You know, these are not things that come up a couple of times a year. We get an increasingly large mailbox of people saying these kinds of things. So we devote ourselves to trying to help these people. There was a case of Yahya, who was a singer in Nigeria. He actually is a Muslim, but he was accused of blasphemy and he was sentenced to death. He got no counsel to represent him. And when we discovered this, we had a few days before he was literally going to be executed. So we immediately hired some lawyers. We sent an appeal in which stopped the execution. And then we worked to get him released. And in fact, what happened is we had his sentence overturned and his conviction overturned. So, but the judge wanted him to go back to be retried in a Sharia court, and that means he faces a prospect again of being found guilty of blasphemy and being hanged. So we are now appealing that, and that's in process.
It goes on. And who's the victim of this blasphemy? Who is hurt by these naughty words? We've yet to find out.
Right. Exactly.
So,
except the powers that be, who want to eradicate anyone who has a thought other than there is a God and it's their particular God.
The control freaks.
Right.
Yeah. So in the US at the moment, you've got a big issue coming up, David, haven't you? You've got the Supreme Court about to pronounce on abortion.
Yes.
They want to get their noses into our genitalia.
They absolutely. And not everybody's genitalia, but definitely a woman's right to a reproductive is severely at risk. And we all already know, as I think I mentioned on your other show, that that there are probably about 18 to 20 states that are very conservative, that at the moment the Supreme Court strikes down Roe v. Wade and makes it a states' rights issue, they will immediately pass the most restrictive abortion law, where of the 50 United States, you might find on the West Coast and the East Coast access very easy or available, and anywhere in the middle and the West and certainly in the Bible Belt, that will go away. And who does that affect? Well, it affects the poorest people.
Yes, who can't travel.
Right. It affects people who are already disadvantaged because of their race and their social economic background. And so you'll have an underground railroad again, or you will have another form of violence against women where they'll be doing back alley abortions. Because it's not just abortion. It's about family planning. It's about prenatal care. And so they're going to wipe that all away. It's almost a war on a woman's right to her body. The same people who don't want you to touch the Second Amendment. You know, don't touch my guns, but you can do whatever you want to
a woman.
She
has no rights.
And the scary thing here is that, you know, Roe v. Wade has settled the law in the United States for 60 years, you know, I can't remember the specific year, but it's been 50 years at least, right? And so we've built on that other things like who you're allowed to love and who you can marry, right? So all of that now, if this becomes, it's almost like playing Jenga. You pull one block out of civil society and the rule of law, and you make that structure wobbly.
And it falls down with
and
a
then
horrible
eventually,
noise, a noisy crash.
Yes, I've always said that democracy eats itself from the inside out. And I think that is sadly some of the case of what's happening in the United States right now.
So they want to turn it back into the Middle Ages. So we have a problem in this country, not that one, fortunately, but we've got poor people, unfortunate people, I should say, not poverty-stricken people, but people who have young children and can't get them into a secular school because the faith schools are taking over gradually. I mean, to such an extent that even the current president, Alice Roberts, of Humanism UK, but she's about to hand over her presidency, and she's got young children. She lives in London, and there is no non-faith, no secular school that she can send them to. That's not something we approve of, is it?
No. I mean, this is the tentacles that you find that, you know, that people say, oh, it's mild, you know, you can ignore it or whatever. But the reality is that it all becomes, I'm an anthropologist, you know, so, you know, you realize that, you know, what are you shaped by? You're shaped by your family most immediately, and then, of course, your community. And where that enculturation really becomes hyper involved is when you start school. Because that's when you really learn to be a quote unquote good little citizen. So if this is being pushed into you, you know, it's very dangerous.
And they push such things as they own morality.
Right.
It's only their morality that's the right one.
Right.
This is nonsense.
Right.
I've remembered his name. It's Adam Rutherford, who's about to become the new president of Humanism UK. So we in AUK, I did a podcast on this a couple of days ago, because we've got people appealing to us about children who are moving up in this particular case, transitioning from junior or primary to secondary. And because, more or less accidentally, they went to a Catholic primary, not because they're Catholics, but because it was the nearest and they thought it wouldn't matter at that age, you know. But what's happened is the bishop of the diocese and the governors of some of the academies who have Catholic governance are saying, you've been to a Catholic school, you must now go to a secondary Catholic school.
For further indoctrination.
Yes, it's outrageous, isn't it?
It has changed, hasn't it? Because some years ago, it was never difficult to find a secular school. But increasingly, it is difficult now. And the government is complicit in this because they fund the religious schools.
We do. We,
the taxpayer, fund religious schools. And the government are quite happy for more and more religious schools to be opened and to forget their responsibility for opening secular schools.
You have something similar in the United States. Although public school is got a very strong tradition, what you have now, because there's so much money being pulled out of public education, which is billions and billions of dollars in the U.S., it's being diverted to charter schools and schools like that. And what you find is that most of the charter schools are religious. And so all of a sudden, if you want your kid to go to a good school, they have to go to a charter school, not a public school. And lo and behold, they're going to be touched by religious indoctrination.
Well, the trouble is here that state-run schools have always been seen by the cabinet. Very often we're governed by privileged people who have been to what you would call a an independent school.
Right.
We would call it a private or a public school. I know it's confusing terminology,
sure.
but a fee-paying school, basically. And they see state education as something that, because they fund it 100%,
Right.
When they want to save money, guess what? They put the screws on.
Public education.
And one of the outcomes of this was back in Tony Blair's prime ministership, when he introduced the academies, because the idea was that they would bring a little bit of money and therefore the state wouldn't have to fund it or wouldn't get accused of underfunding it to quite such an extent. And he offered organizations like churches and mosques and synagogues an opportunity to put a little bit of money into an academy, and he gave them control of key things like the religious instruction syllabus and other things so that they could promote their particular doctrine. Some of the academies are partnered by commercial enterprises, and that's not so bad.
Right.
They don't have...
They're closer to what we would consider secular.
Exactly.
But we have some of these religious schools now that are funded by the government, refusing to teach evolution.
This is the danger, I think, that religion plays in the secular life that we all choose to lead. You know, and I found this is that it's not just in here. It's in the idea that somehow religion gets a pass because it's going to be good for you in the end.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I was the American Humanists Association's representative to the United Nations for 5 years. And while I would hate to see a world without the United Nations, the idea there is never a question of do we hold religious countries or religious people to account for their failures or their violence. It's like, how can we ensure that people can be touched the best way possible by religion?
Yeah.
And it's a different mindset. It's like somehow religion is the salve that you can wear that will heal you, when in fact it's actually what's damaging you.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the whole thing is like a Chicago gangsters, what did they call it? Protection racket. You know, we're going to invent some harm, so that we can sell you an equally false cure.
Right. Hey, I grew up in Brooklyn. I know all about it.
And,
The real thing.
Yeah.
And you actually, for your first 8 years, you were raised as a Jew?
But I mean, I would say very lightly. My parents were believers, but they weren't, like, they didn't necessarily go to synagogue or anything like that. They just, for themselves, they felt that that there is something bigger out there, but they never pushed it on me or my sisters. And by around 8 years old, I realized that.
Seeing through it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, what bollock.
Do your sisters feel the same way?
Well, my sisters, one sister who she's passed now, was a believer. My other sister has sort of gone the way of crystals and spirituality, and which is its own level of
I always think it's a halfway house towards atheism.
Well, it can be, because you know she's very curious and very smart, but it's not directed towards. It's directed towards. There's magic in the world. There are fairies in my backyard.
Yes.
Even if I can't see them.
Yes.
You know, there's this big juju in the world that is making it go around or whatever.
Yeah. So in the UK, we have maybe 30 or so % of people that are religious now. But it means that there's a huge growth in that sector of people who are spiritual and believe in weird things that they can't prove or demonstrate.
Right.
And the number of people who are actually atheists, well, it's still, maybe it's half now, maybe 50%, I think.
Well, I think that would be wonderful in the United States, because in the United States, that number's around 30%. And we call them the nuns, and not Nuns, Nones. and that's mostly the younger generations.
Yes.
So they might, in fact, there's you might have heard of Pew Research. They do a lot of. Okay, there's something equivalent to that for religious research called the Barner Group, BARNER, and they do a lot of tracking and statistics and surveying of religious identity.
Of the decline.
Yes, and their own data suggests the same thing that the secular data shows, is that America is less formally religious.
Yeah.
The houses of worship are empty. They are vestigial. And that people, if they are spiritual, it is a private matter. And so the number of people who, you're like in all evangelical religions, Christian, Jews, Muslims, whatever, they're going to be that intense, bit of coal that's going to always be with us, but for the rest of us, it's becoming more pluralistic and more secular.
Yeah. I've not heard of Barno, but I certainly am going to investigate them. Do they have an atheistic perspective?
No, they're basically actually religious, I think.
They're religious, which is really interesting, and why I respect it is because they don't sugarcoat it.
Yeah.
They don't put anything on top of the muffin to say, oh, but it's getting better. They show quite literally the same thing that others show.
Yeah. So in the UK now, it's not hard to buy a church.
No.
And people convert them into quite posh dwellings.
Yeah, there's one near me that's an eye hospital now. Much better use.
I was going to say, much better use. I actually, my wife and I, my family and I, we actually looked at, in 2018, this was before the pandemic, looked at possibly buying a disenfranchised church or de-accessing church in... Deconsecrated church in this town in Lee, Massachusetts, and we were going to turn it into a humanist center for the arts, for the humanities, for science education, and sadly it fell through, for several reasons, not from our own personal will to make it happen, but for several reasons. So just in a 1 block radius of where I work, the Catholic Church closed. It was leveled, and they put up housing for homeless mothers. Yeah. So a much better use of the land and the space. Of course, the Catholic Church is a huge, at least in the United States, land baron. So even if there's not a church, they're still making money. Yes. It's still going into their coffers because they're leasing the land now to New York City to build this thing. And so they're not saving souls, so to speak, or not that they ever could.
Not only are our churches closing down, but they can't get the clergy to run the churches that still exist. So we now have the spectacle of a pastor preaching his Sunday sermon at one church and then getting on his bike and going to the next church. And he starts at the 10 o'clock service and does the 12 o'clock service at another church.
And I think that's the right trend. I think it's the right outcome. And it's interesting because I think if you look at the demographics, that it's not, white guys from European countries anymore. It's people from Latin America. It's people from Africa who are leading those services, or Asia or the Philippines, because people aren't going into it as an avocation anymore. They're not going into it as a profession. And we can thank the Catholic Church for that data too, because it shows that who's becoming a nun, who's becoming a priest.
It's absolutely clear, isn't it, that I think there are two factors that have impacted the decline in the US. One is the sex scandal with children from the Catholic Church. Yes. Huge numbers of people left the Catholic Church as a result of that. But the other thing is the desire for the Protestant churches to be anti-gay. And they have been preaching anti-gay for so long, but it just turns people away.
Sure.
And I'm sure that's been a big factor.
Well, I think the message is, whether, and the message for me has always been stay in the light, build the bridges, You know, make the community as wide and diverse as possible. Because frankly, it's none of my business who you love. It's none of my business on a whole wide demographic. You know, I don't care if you're woke or anti-woke or any of that other stuff. Let's see what we can do to build together. And that's the tent that I think AI has built and continues to build, and certainly under my presidency of the board will continue to build.
So if I gave you a magic wand.
Yes. Well, we are in the land of Harry Potter, so.
What would you do with it? What would you wish for?
Wow, that's a great question. I think I'd wish for people to be better educated.
Yeah.
I think as a baseline that I'd wish for the social safety net be set that people had access to good education and access to healthcare that wouldn't leave them devastated by bills, like in the United States at least, right? You know, here you have the NHS, but in America, if you get sick and you don't have health insurance, you're good as dead.
Yeah, because or bankrupt at least.
Bankrupt at least, exactly. So that, and I think, you know, educating in the most secular and scientific way. If you can build those two safety nets of the body and the mind, you would have a very different world, because people wouldn't be, I think, as susceptible to the fear of what's going to happen to me. And will have the knowledge to be able to make better choices, whether it be politics, whether it be, you know, a whole thing, you know, laundry list of possible things. Critical thinking, and you know who do you want to be with, and all these other things come into play there, because knowledge is power, and I'm a big fan of Carl Sagan. Another
died too young,
way too young, and you know another Jewish boy from Brooklyn too, I must say. And so I'm always enamored by him. I always go back to his books and reread them. And he talked about, I think in one of his books, I'm trying to remember which one, about the danger of having a society where people don't have knowledge.
Yes. They can't make wise decisions.
And can't make don't understand what's happening, don't understand what's happening to them, can't parse the bullshit from the reality.
It's the basis of Animal Farm, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. I think it was, what is it, Science is the Candle in the Dark. That was the subtitle. I'm trying to remember the name of the book. It'll come to me later.
We'll put it in the details underneath.
Okay, yeah.
Guys, it sounds to me as though what you're trying to do is put atheist organizations out of business.
Wouldn't it be great to one day not have to have a Humanist International or an AAI or an American Humanist Association or American Atheist or Freedom from Religion Foundation or any of those, because we're not asking for more rights.
No.
We're asking for equal rights.
Human rights and equal sexual rights.
Right, exactly.
We want more active women in politics and so on.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
I think
My
you
pleasure.
did.
Yes, thank you.
I think you've been fantastic.
Thank you.